Every morning, at exactly 7:15, 8-year-old Matteo would stand outside Bellamy's bakery, his threadbare jacket pulled tight against the winter chill, watching through the steamy windows as Chef Laurent created magnificent pastries that cost more than his mother made in an hour. The boy never begged, never asked for handouts. He simply stood there silently inhaling the sweet scents wafting through the door each time a customer entered, until one morning when the renowned chef, known for his strict adherence to culinary traditions and uncompromising standards, noticed the child's hollow cheeks and made a decision that would break every rule he lived by. If you love stories about simple acts of kindness that transform lives in unexpected ways, please subscribe to our channel now so you don't miss any of these heartwarming tales that restore your faith in humanity. The first time Chef Laurent approached Matteo, the boy startled and nearly ran away, assuming he was about to be shooed from his viewing spot like shop owners had done so many times before. Instead, the tall man with flour-dusted hands and a serious expression knelt down to the child's eye level and asked a question that would change both their lives forever. Would you like to learn how to make the perfect croissant? Matteo's morning ritual had begun 3 months ago when winter first tightened its grip on the city. On that morning, his mother had left earlier than usual for her cleaning job, leaving him to walk himself to school. The bitter cold had driven him to seek warmth in shop doorways along the way, and that's when he'd first glimpsed the wonders. Inside Bellamy's bakery, through the foggy glass, he had watched mesmerized as a tall man with stern features transformed simple ingredients into works of art, hands moving with precise, confident motions, folding, rolling, cutting. It was like watching a magician, except instead of rabbits from hats, he produced flaky golden pastries and delicate cakes, decorated with impossible precision. Matteo had been late to school that day. The next morning, he'd left home 20 minutes early just to stand outside the bakery windows. And the next day, and the day after that, he never spoke to anyone, never caused trouble. Matteo simply stood, hands in his pockets, watching. Occasionally, when the bakery door opened, he would close his eyes and breathe deeply, capturing the warm, sweet-smelling air before it dissipated in the winter cold. At home, the refrigerator was often empty. His mother, Alina, worked as a hotel cleaner. In the mornings, a dishwasher at a restaurant. In the afternoons, and 3 nights a week, she cleaned offices. Still, they barely made the rent on their 1-bedroom apartment in the rundown part of town. Food is fuel, Matteo, nothing more, she would say on the nights when dinner was just plain rice or a single boiled egg. We are not here to enjoy, we are here to survive. But Matteo had discovered something at the bakery window. Food could be more than fuel. It could be beautiful, exciting, magical. The way the baker moved, the care in each gesture, it was like watching his mother when she sang softly in Spanish while brushing his hair on Sunday mornings. It was love made visible. The baker himself had not noticed Matteo for the first few weeks. He moved through his kitchen with military precision, focused entirely on his craft. The few employees who worked the front counter seemed slightly afraid of him jumping to attention whenever he emerged from the kitchen. Customers too treated him with a reverence Matteo didn't fully understand, though he could sense the man was important. It was only when a delivery truck had blocked Matteo's usual viewing spot, forcing him to press his face directly against the front window, that the baker had first looked up and noticed him. Matteo had seen the flash of annoyance in the man's eyes and had quickly backed away, but had returned to his regular spot the next day. After that, Matteo occasionally caught the baker watching him, first with irritation, then with something that looked like curiosity. Matteo was careful not to press his face against the glass again, not wanting to anger the man who created such beautiful things. As the weeks passed and the winter grew colder, Matteo's jacket grew thinner. It had been his cousin's before him and had already been well worn when he received it. Now the zipper was broken entirely, and one of the sleeves was coming unstitched at the shoulder. Matteo held it closed with one hand as he watched through the window. He had become familiar with the rhythms of the bakery, knew that at exactly 6:30 the baker would begin the day's croissants. At 6:45, he moved to the bread dough that had been rising overnight. At 7 o'clock, the front counter staff arrived, and the baker would shift to delicate pastry work, the part Matteo loved best. The neighborhood was changing. New condominiums had gone up 2 blocks away, bringing wealthier customers to the area. Matteo had noticed how these customers would sometimes look at him standing in his worn clothes outside the upscale bakery. Some ignored him completely. Others gave him pitying looks or hurried past as if his poverty might be contagious. One particularly cold morning, a woman in a long wool coat had approached the bakery as Matteo stood in his usual spot. "Are you going in, or just loitering?" she had asked sharply, nudging him aside with her shopping bag. "You shouldn't block the entrance." Matteo had stepped back quickly, ducking his head. "Sorry, ma'am," he'd murmured, although he hadn't been blocking anything. Inside the bakery, he had seen the chef look up at the commotion. For a moment, their eyes had met through the glass, the boy shivering outside, the man warm in flour dust. Within him, something had changed in the baker's expression, then a hardness giving way to something else. The woman had purchased her items and left without acknowledging Matteo again. He had returned to his spot, watching as the baker assembled a complex tower of cream puffs. his movements quick and confident. When the baker had suddenly put down his piping bag and walked toward the front of the shop, Matteo had assumed he was finally going to be told to leave to stop bothering the customers. He had prepared himself to argue. He wasn't doing anything wrong, wasn't bothering anyone, just watching, but the words died in his throat as the baker pushed open the door and approached him. Up close, the man was even taller than he'd appeared. Through the window, his face lined with what looked like a permanent frown. Flour dusted his black chef's coat, and a smudge of chocolate marked one cheek. His eyes were dark, intense, serious. Matteo had nearly run, then fear and embarrassment overwhelming his fascination. But something held him in place, as the baker knelt down, his face now level with Matteo's. "Would you like to learn how to make the perfect croissant?" The baker had asked, his French accent thick, but his words clear. Matteo could only stare shocked into silence. By the unexpected question, well, the baker had prompted an edge of impatience in his voice. "I don't have all day. Yes or no?" Finding his voice at last, Matteo had whispered yes, please, hardly daring to believe what was happening. "Good," the baker had said, rising to his full height. "Come inside then. It's too cold out here for proper baking lessons." And with that, Chef Laurent Durand, the most celebrated pastry chef in the city, had held the door open, waiting for the small, shivering boy to step into the warm sweets world that until now Matteo had only observed from outside. Chef Laurent Durand had not slept well. He rarely did these days, the perfectionism that made him exceptional in the kitchen translating to insomnia in his personal life. At precisely 4:30 a.m., he had given up trying getting out of bed in his sparse apartment and walking the 8 blocks to Bellamy's bakery in darkness. The kitchen was his sanctuary. White marble counters, gleaming stainless steel professional ovens with perfect temperature control. Everything in its place, nothing extraneous. Bellamy's had been open for 3 years, and in that time had established itself as the premier in the city. Not that the city knew much about proper French pastry, Laurent often thought with disdain, that as he tied his apron with practiced movements, Laurent reflected on his journey. 15 years at the finest establishments in Paris, culminating in his position as head pastry chef at the 3 Michelin-starred Le Ciel, then the crushing disappointment when owner and head chef Georges Martel had passed him over for partnership, choosing instead his younger, less experienced, but more personable cousin. "You are a brilliant technician," Laurent Martel had said, "but a patisserie needs heart as well as hands." The memory still stung. Laurent had left Paris within the month, wounded pride, driving him across the Atlantic to prove Martel wrong. Sophia Bellamy, a wealthy American who had trained briefly at Le Ciel, had offered to bankroll his own establishment, making him the creative force while she handled the business end. It had been the perfect arrangement on paper. Creative freedom. At last, yet 3 years in, Laurent found himself restless, unsatisfied. The accolades came: best new bakery in the city, a feature in Bon Appétit, glowing reviews. But something was missing. The joy he had once found in creating perfect pastry had faded, leaving only the relentless pursuit of technical excellence. Sophia had noticed, "You need to connect with the customers, Laurent," she had suggested last week during their monthly business meeting. "They're intimidated by you. They admire your work, but they don't feel welcome." "I'm not here to make friends," he had replied stiffly. "I'm here to make perfect pastry." Sophia had sighed, that familiar look of exasperation crossing her face. Perfect pastry served in an empty bakery won't pay the bills. The neighborhood is changing, we need to change with it. Laurent had dismissed her concerns. The work was what mattered. Everything else was distraction. He began his morning routine with mathematical precision. Butter laminated dough for croissants first, then the sourdough bread, then the delicate choux pastry for the day's Paris Brest. Each movement refined by years of practice, muscle memory so ingrained he could almost work with his eyes closed. His small staff knew better than to arrive early or to attempt conversation before the morning bake was complete. There were rules at Bellamy's, unspoken but ironclad. No one entered the kitchen without Laurent's permission. No recipe was ever altered. No free samples, no matter how charming the customer. No children allowed near the delicate pastry displays. Laurent was midway through piping creme pâtissière when he heard the bell above the door. 6:30, too early for customers. Sophia then, or perhaps Camille arriving early for her shift. At the counter, "We're not open," he called without looking up. "It's me, Laurent, and we need to talk." "Sophia." Her tone suggested another uncomfortable conversation was imminent. Laurent suppressed a sigh, setting down his piping bag with precise movements before turning to face his business partner, Sophia. Bellamy was American exuberance personified today, dressed in a bright red coat, her dark hair cut in a stylish bob, a cup of takeout coffee in her hand. Everything about her seemed designed to disrupt the monochrome tranquility of Laurent's kitchen. "What is so urgent? It couldn't wait until after the morning bake?" he asked, checking his watch pointedly. Sophia took a deliberate sip of her coffee. "The Jefferson Street development is complete. First residents moving in this week, and we need to capitalize on it. These are wealthy people, Laurent, young professionals, young families, people who will pay premium prices for premium products, but But what?" Laurent asked impatiently. "But they need to feel welcome. The feedback I'm getting is that while everyone agrees your pastry is exceptional, the atmosphere is intimidating, Laurent scoffed. Intimidating? This is a patisserie, not a daycare center. Exactly that attitude. Sophia pointed at him with her coffee cup. That's what's keeping us from reaching our potential. You're brilliant, Laurent, but She paused, searching for a diplomatic word. I'm unapproachable, rigid. Our staff is terrified of you. Jenna dropped a tray of madeleines yesterday and burst into tears because she was so afraid of your reaction. Laurent felt a flash of irritation. If they followed proper procedures, they're human. They make mistakes. Sophia set down her coffee, fixing him with a serious look. The neighborhood is evolving. Either we evolve with it or we get left behind. Laurent turned back to his pastry cream. I have work to do. Sophia didn't move. There's one more thing. Remember when I suggested we do a children's baking class on weekends, which I vetoed? Children have no place in a professional kitchen. Well, I still think it's a good idea. Children bring families. Families become loyal customers. Tell their friends. It's basic business. Laurent didn't respond, focusing instead on the perfect consistency of his crème pâtissière. Sophia sighed. Just think about it. We could start small. One class, see how it goes. After she left, Laurent continued his work, trying to recapture the sense of flow that had been interrupted. Children in his kitchen. Impossible. He had standards: precision, cleanliness, order. Children were chaos embodied. His mind drifted to the boy, the one who had been watching through the window for weeks now. Thin face, serious eyes. Something about the child's focused attention had begun to penetrate Laurent's carefully constructed isolation. The boy didn't fidget, didn't press sticky fingers against the glass, didn't behave like a child at all. He watched with the intensity of an apprentice. Laurent had noticed the threadbare jacket, the hollow cheeks. He wasn't oblivious, just focused on his work. But this morning, when that woman had so rudely pushed the boy aside, something had shifted. In Laurent's carefully ordered world, he remembered another thin boy from long ago, standing outside a different bakery in a different country, hungry not just for food but for knowledge. Laurent glanced at the clock. Nearly 7. The boy would be at his usual spot soon, watching through the window. The question was, what would Laurent do about it? The interior of Bellamy's bakery was even more magical than Matteo had imagined. Warm golden light illuminated gleaming glass cases displaying pastries so perfect they hardly seemed real. The air was thick with the scent of butter, sugar, vanilla, cinnamon, richer and more intoxicating, up close, than the faint traces that had escaped through the door. Matteo stood just inside the entrance, afraid to move, afraid to touch anything, afraid this miraculous invitation might be withdrawn. At any moment, the bakery wouldn't open to customers for another hour, but two young women were already preparing the front counter, arranging napkins and checking the espresso machine. They stared at Matteo with undisguised shock, then at Chef Laurent, with something that looked like fear. Camille, Jenna, this is... The chef paused, realizing he didn't know the boy's name. Matteo, the boy supplied his voice, barely above a whisper. This is Matteo. He will be observing this morning. The women exchanged glances, but knew better than to question their intimidating boss. Matteo could read the questions in their expressions. Who was this shabby child, and why had the notoriously strict Chef Laurent invited him inside? This way, Laurent said, gesturing toward the kitchen. He didn't check to see if Matteo followed, simply assumed obedience. But Matteo trailed behind, trying not to gape at his The kitchen was nothing like the cramped cooking space in his apartment with its temperamental two-burner stove and mini refrigerator. This was a laboratory, a workshop, an artist's studio. Stainless steel gleamed everywhere. Enormous ovens lined one wall. Marble countertops stretched the length of the room, immaculately clean and dusted with flour. Wash your hands there, Laurent instructed, pointing to a deep sink. Thoroughly, soap wrists too. Matteo complied, scrubbing his small hands until they were pink. Chef Laurent handed him a crisp white towel for drying, then to Matteo's surprise, produced a child-sized apron from a drawer. Sophia ordered these for her children's class idea, he explained, seeing Matteo's questioning look. Foolishness, but useful now, I suppose. The apron engulfed Matteo, but he tied it carefully at the waist, the way he'd seen Laurent's tied, in a precise knot. The chef noticed this, nodded once in approval. Have you eaten breakfast? Laurent asked abruptly. Matteo hesitated, then shook his head. There had been no time that morning, and nothing in the refrigerator anyway. Without comment, Laurent selected a plain croissant from a cooling rack and placed it on a small plate. Eat this first. I cannot teach someone who is distracted by hunger. Matteo accepted the plate, his eyes widening at the sight of the perfect golden pastry. He'd seen these through the window, of course, but never imagined actually eating one. He knew they cost $4 each. His mother would work 20 minutes to earn that much. Instead of taking a bite, Matteo carefully wrapped the croissant in a napkin and tucked it into his jacket pocket. Laurent frowned. What are you doing? Saving it for later, Matteo explained. For after school. Thank you. Something flickered in Laurent's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. That one is for now, he said, his voice oddly gentle. There will be another for later. Matteo stared up at him, uncertain. Really? Yes. Now eat. We have work to do. Cautiously, Matteo took a small bite of the croissant. The exterior crackled perfectly, giving way to an interior of soft, airy layers, rich with butter. He couldn't prevent the small sound of amazement that escaped him. Laurent watched the boy's reaction with interest. Good. Matteo nodded, unable to speak around his mouth full of pastry. He forced himself to eat slowly, to savor each bite, though hunger urged him to devour it. The perfect croissant has 27 layers, Laurent explained as Matteo ate. It requires precision, patience, attention to temperature. The butter must be cold but pliable. The dough must rest between fillings. Most important is the lamination, creating distinct layers of dough and butter. Matteo listened, absorbing every word. When he finished eating, he carefully brushed the crumbs into his palm and disposed of them in the trash, exactly as he'd seen Laurent do with some discarded dough earlier. Now, Laurent said, placing a small step stool beside the marble counter, watch carefully. For the next 45 minutes, Matteo stood mesmerized as Laurent demonstrated the beginning stages of croissant dough. The chef's hands moved with hypnotic precision, measuring ingredients without using measuring cups or spoons, simply knowing by sight and feel how much was needed. This dough was started yesterday, Laurent explained, showing Matteo a chilled rectangle wrapped in parchment. Croissants cannot be rushed. Now we continue the lamination process. He demonstrated how to encase a thin sheet of cold butter within the dough, then fold it like a letter. Matteo watched every movement, committing them to memory. Would you like to try the fold? Laurent asked unexpectedly. Matteo nodded eagerly, then hesitated. What if I make a mistake? Then you learn, Laurent replied simply. This is practice dough. With trembling hands, Matteo attempted to mimic Laurent's precise movements. His small fingers were nimble but unpracticed. The fold wasn't perfect, the edges not quite aligned. Laurent studied the result critically. Again, he said, not unkindly, watch the corners. Matteo tried once more, concentrating intensely. This time the fold was better, the edges meeting more precisely. Better, Laurent acknowledged. It takes thousands of repetitions to develop muscle memory. I began my apprenticeship at 12 and did nothing but fold dough for 6 months. Matteo looked up in surprise. You were a kid when you started. Something in Laurent's expression closed off. Yes, a different time, different country. Now the dough must rest again in the refrigerator. As Laurent wrapped the dough, Matteo glanced at the clock on the wall. I have to go to school soon, he said regretfully. Laurent nodded. Yes, education is important. Can I? Matteo began, then faltered, unsure if he was allowed to ask. Can I come back tomorrow? Laurent studied the boy, his expression unreadable. The kitchen staff had been stealing glances throughout the lesson, clearly astonished by their chef's uncharacteristic patience. Yes, Laurent said finally. 7:15. Don't be late. As promised, he wrapped a fresh croissant for Matteo to take with him. The boy accepted it with reverence, carefully placing it in his other pocket separate from the first. Thank you, chef, Matteo said formally, for the lesson and the croissants. Laurent merely nodded, but as Matteo turned to leave, he added, bring your school books tomorrow. You can do homework here after our lesson until school begins. Matteo's face lit up with a smile so bright, it seemed to change the very atmosphere of the kitchen. Yes, chef, he agreed, then hurried out the door, already planning how to tell his mother about this miraculous morning. Elena Martinez dragged herself up the 4 flights of stairs to their apartment, fatigue weighing down each step. The elevator had been broken for months, the landlord always promising repairs that never materialized. At 32, her body sometimes felt twice that age, worn down by long hours of physical labor and constant worry. The apartment was quiet. When she entered, Matteo already asleep in the pull-out bed that occupied most of their small living room. Elena moved silently, placing her purse on the kitchen counter and removing her shoes. Her feet throbbed from 9 hours of standing, scrubbing, mopping. Tomorrow she would do it all again. In the dim light from the street lamp outside, Elena studied her sleeping son. At 8, Matteo had already developed a seriousness that sometimes broke her heart. He rarely complained, never asked for toys or treats. Like other children, understood without being told that there was no money for extras. His face in sleep was softer, younger, the worries that sometimes creased his forehead temporarily erased. Elena opened the refrigerator, its bare shelves illuminated by the weak interior light. Half a carton of milk, some eggs, a withered apple. Payday wasn't until Friday. They would make do as they always did, stretching meals carefully until then. She was but about to close the door when she noticed something unexpected on the middle shelf, a carefully wrapped package that hadn't been there this morning. Curious, Elena removed it, unwrapping the napkin to reveal a perfect golden croissant. Mama, you're home. Matteo stood in the doorway of their tiny kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. He wore the too large t-shirt that served as his pajamas, his hair tousled from sleep. Matteo, what is this? Elena asked, holding up the pastry. Where did it come from? Matteo's face brightened. From Bellamy's bakery. The French chef gave it to me. The words tumbled out in his excitement. He invited me inside and showed me how to make croissants, and said I can come back tomorrow morning. Elena's expression shifted from confusion to concern. What chef? What are you talking about? Matteo explained, in a rush about standing outside. The bakery how Chef Laurent had noticed him invited him inside, given him not one but 2 croissants. He's teaching me to bake, Mama, real French pastry. I saved one for you. Alina sat heavily on one of their 2 kitchen chairs. Alarm bells rang in her mind. Strange men did not simply invite children into their businesses, give them food, offer special attention without wanting something in return. The world had taught Alina this lesson repeatedly and harshly. Matteo, you cannot go back there, she said, firmly. We don't know this man. Matteo's face fell. But Mama, he's famous. His picture is in magazines. And he's going to teach me? No. Alina cut him off. It's not appropriate. I don't want you going to that bakery anymore. Tears welled in Matteo's eyes. Please, Mama, it's not like that. He's just teaching me about baking, I promise. Alina softened at her son's distress. Matteo had so little joy in his life, had never asked for anything beyond their means. But her protective instincts overrode her desire to see him happy. We'll discuss it in the morning, she said, knowing her mind was already made up. Go back to bed now. After Matteo reluctantly returned to his bed, Alina studied the croissant. It did look magnificent. Professionally made, far beyond what was available at the supermarket bakeries she occasionally visited. Bellamy's was one of those upscale businesses that had appeared in their changing neighborhood, pricing out longtime residents, making Alina feel like a stranger on streets she'd walked for years. Despite her suspicion, hunger won out. Alina took a small bite of the croissant and couldn't suppress a small sound of appreciation. It was exquisite, buttery flaky, with a complex flavor that lingered. She understood suddenly why Matteo had been so captivated watching through the window. The next morning, after a restless night, Alina woke Matteo earlier than usual. I'm coming with you to this bakery, she announced. I want to meet this chef. Matteo's expression was a mixture of relief and apprehension. Really? You'll come? Yes. I need to understand what's happening. They walked the 6 blocks to Bellamy's. In the early morning darkness, Alina's work uniform in her bag for her shift that began at 9. Matteo led the way, practically vibrating with nervous energy. That's it, he said, pointing to a storefront still illuminated from within, though the street remained dark. Through the windows, Alina could see a tall man in chef bites working with focused intensity, a study in precision and concentration. That's Chef Laurent, Matteo whispered with something like reverence. Alina studied the man. He appeared to be in his 40s with stern features and a rigid posture. Nothing about him suggested warmth or kindness, yet her son looked at him as if he hung the moon. Come on, she said, taking Matteo's hand firmly. We're going to talk to him. Inside, the bakery smelled heavenly, warm, yeasty sweet. The front counter was still being prepared for the day, 2 young women arranging pastries in the display case. They looked up in surprise as Alina entered with Matteo. We're not open yet, one began, then stopped seeing Matteo. Oh, you're the boy from yesterday. I need to speak with the chef, Alina said, her voice steady, despite her nervousness. The women exchanged glances, one disappearing into the back, only to return moments later, followed by the tall chef. Flour dusted his black uniform, his expression impassive as he assessed Alina. You must be Matteo's mother, he said, his French accent pronounced. Yes, Alina Martinez. May I speak with you privately, please? If he was surprised by her directness, he didn't show it this way, he said, gesturing toward a small office off the main floor. The space was spare and functional. A desk, 2 chairs, a filing cabinet. No personal touches, no photographs. Alina remained standing, too anxious to sit. Double quotes. Mr. Durand. Laurent Durand. Mr. Durand, I appreciate your kindness to my son, but I'm concerned about the nature of this arrangement. His eyebrows rose slightly. The nature? Alina squared her shoulders. Yes, a grown man inviting a child he doesn't know into his business. Giving him food, offering special attention. Surely you understand why a mother might be concerned. Laurent's expression shifted from neutral to something harder. You think I have improper intentions toward your son? I don't know what your intentions are, Alina replied. That's why I'm here. For a moment they regarded each other in tense silence. Then unexpectedly, Laurent's posture relaxed slightly. Your concern is reasonable, he acknowledged. In your position, I would be suspicious too. But I assure you, my interest in your son is purely professional. He shows unusual focus for a child his age, a natural appreciation for the craft. He's 8 years old, Alina pointed out. I began my training at 12, Laurent countered. Talent should be nurtured early. Alina studied him, searching for signs of deception, finding none. Why my son? Why Matteo specifically? Laurent seemed to consider his answer carefully. Because he reminds me of myself at that age, hungry for more than just food. Alina's eyes narrowed, studying the chef's face for any hint of deception. Hungry for more than just food, he had said. The words struck uncomfortably close to home, acknowledging something Alina had tried to ignore. That Matteo's intelligence, his curiosity, his potential were all being limited by their circumstances. I still don't understand what you get out of this arrangement, she said. Laurent's expression remained unreadable. Perhaps nothing, perhaps an apprentice someday. At minimum, the satisfaction of passing knowledge to someone who appreciates it. Before Alina could respond, the office door opened, and a stylishly dressed woman appeared. Laurent, the Palmiers need to owe. I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had company. Sophia, this is Mateo's mother, Ms. Martinez. Ms. Martinez, this is Sophia. Bellamy, my business partner. Sophia's face lit with recognition. Mateo, the boy from yesterday. Laurent actually told me about him, which is remarkable because Laurent never volunteers information about anything. She extended her hand to Alina. I'm delighted to meet you. Alina shook the offered hand cautiously. Your partner was just explaining his interest in teaching my son. Is that what he's doing? Sophia smiled. How wonderful. I've been trying to get Laurent to connect with the community for ages. She turned to Laurent. See, this is exactly what I was talking about: community engagement, personal connection. Laurent's expression suggested this conversation was veering in directions he hadn't intended. Sophia, perhaps you could explain to Ms. Martinez the children's program you wanted to implement? Oh yes, of course. Sophia turned back to Alina, her enthusiasm palpable. We've been planning to start children's baking classes on weekends. Laurent has been hesitant, but with Mateo as a sort of trial run, maybe he'll see the value. Alina glanced between them, sensing an ongoing disagreement. So my son would be an experiment? Not at all, Sophia assured her. More like a pilot program, one-on-one instruction, with a master pastry chef. Do you know what some parents in this city would pay for that opportunity? I cannot pay anything, Alina said bluntly. We barely make rent each month. Sophia waved this away. Of course we wouldn't charge. In fact, we should compensate Mateo for his time. That is unnecessary, Lauren interrupted. The instruction itself has value. Alina found herself warming slightly to Sophia, whose warmth seemed genuine in contrast to Lauren's austerity. What exactly would this arrangement involve? She asked cautiously. Mateo has school, he has responsibilities. 1 hour each morning, Laurent said, 7 to 8. Basic instruction in French pastry. Perhaps some mathematics as it applies to baking. Nothing inappropriate, nothing dangerous. And breakfast, Sophia added, giving Laurent a pointed look. A growing boy needs proper nutrition. Laurent nodded once in concession. Yes, and breakfast. Alina thought of her empty refrigerator, of Mateo's hollow cheeks, of the spark in his eyes when he spoke of the bakery. A free breakfast 5 days a week would help considerably with their tight budget. Still, she hesitated. I would need to be certain he's safe. You're welcome to observe any time, Sophia offered. Our kitchen meets all health and safety regulations. And Laurent may look intimidating, but he's actually quite. Sophia. Laurent cut her off with a warning tone. Alina made her decision. 1 week trial period. I'll bring him each morning before my shift and pick him up at 8 to walk him to school. If at any point I'm uncomfortable with the arrangement, it ends immediately. Laurent nodded, accepting these terms. Agreed. Wonderful. Sophia clapped her hands together. Shall we all have coffee to celebrate? Or hot chocolate for Mateo? I need to speak with my son first, Alina said. Sophia nodded, understanding. Of course. Use the office. Take your time. When they were alone, Alina found Mateo sitting exactly where she'd left him in the front of the bakery, his expression anxious. Mama, he asked, reading her face for clues. 1 week, she told him. We'll try this for 1 week and see how it goes. Mateo's face transformed excitement, replacing worry. Really? I can learn from Chef Laurent. Yes, but there are rules. You must be respectful. Do exactly as he says. If anything makes you uncomfortable, anything at all, you tell me immediately. I will, Mama, I promise. Mateo could barely contain himself, practically bouncing as they returned to the office where Laurent and Sophia waited. The next day began their new routine. Alina would walk Mateo to the bakery at 6:55, exchange brief nods with Laurent, then continue to her morning cleaning job. At precisely 7 o'clock, Mateo would don his child-sized apron, wash his hands, and stand ready for instruction. At 7:50, Alina would return walk Mateo to school, then head to her second job. By the third day, Alina had to admit the arrangement seemed to be working well. Mateo was happier than she'd seen him in months, talking excitedly about laminated dough, proper kneading techniques, the importance of butter temperature. Each morning he received breakfast, usually a croissant, or pain au chocolate with a glass of milk. More importantly, he was learning not just about baking, but about discipline, precision, the satisfaction of creating something beautiful with his own hands. Laurent remained formal, never demonstrating overt warmth. Yet Alina noticed small kindnesses, the way he'd positioned a step stool at the exact right height for Mateo, the patience with which he demonstrated techniques, the flash of approval in his eyes when Mateo executed a task correctly. On Friday, when Alina arrived to collect, Mateo, Laurent approached her directly. Your son has potential, he said without preamble. He listens, follows instructions, has good instincts. The trial week ends today. Will you permit him to continue? Alina considered. The benefits were clear. Mateo was thriving under Laurent's instruction, his confidence growing, along with his knowledge. The free breakfast was a significant help to their budget. And despite her initial suspicions, Alina had seen nothing to suggest Laurent's interest was anything but professional. Yes, she decided. He can continue. Laurent nodded once as if he'd expected nothing less. Good. Also, Sophia suggests we provide a proper meal before he leaves, not just pastry. Growing children need protein. Alina bristled slightly at what felt like criticism of her parenting. I feed my son as well as I can. Something shifted in Laurent's expression, the stern facade cracking momentarily. I know. I understand better than you might think. He hesitated, then added, I grew up poor too, in Marseille. There were many days when the only meal I ate was at the patisserie where I apprenticed. The personal revelation surprised Alina. Before she could respond, Laurent turned away, returning to his professional demeanor. Monday 7 a.m., he said over his shoulder. Don't be late. As they walked to school, Matteo chattered happily about the eclairs Laurent had demonstrated that morning. Alina listened with half an ear, her mind still processing Laurent's unexpected disclosure. The stern chef suddenly seemed more human, more understandable. Perhaps they weren't so different after all. Both doing their best with limited resources. Both wanting something better for Matteo. Mama, Matteo interrupted her thoughts. Are you listening? Alina smiled, squeezing his hand. Yes, mijo. Tell me more about these eclairs. 3 weeks into their arrangement, a routine had firmly established itself. Matteo arrived each morning, eager and prepared. Laurent demonstrated techniques with meticulous precision. Matteo observed attempted practice. Failure was permitted, but carelessness was not. Again, Laurent would say when Matteo's piping wasn't perfectly even. Slower this time. Control your pressure. The boy never complained, never showed frustration, simply nodded and tried again. This resilience impressed Laurent more than any natural talent could have. Persistence, he knew from experience, was more valuable than aptitude in the long run. February turned to March, the mornings gradually brightening as they worked. Matteo's movements became more confident, his understanding of basic principles more solid. He could now prepare simple dough without supervision, could identify when a mixture had been properly emulsified, could even detect by smell when the delicate madeleines were perfectly baked. That the staff had grown accustomed to Matteo's presence. Camille often sneaked him extra pastries when Laurent wasn't looking. Jenna had taught him how to operate the espresso machine, a secret skill practiced only when the chef was busy with deliveries. Even the taciturn delivery drivers greeted Matteo by name, now asking about his progress with genuine interest. Most surprising was the change in Laurent himself. The transformation was subtle, evident mainly in what Sophia called microscopic facial expression adjustments. The slight relaxation around his eyes when Matteo executed a technique correctly, when the boy asked insightful questions. He's different with the kid, Jenna whispered to Camille one morning as they watched Laurent patiently demonstrate the proper way to fold egg whites into batter. I've never seen him explain anything twice without getting irritated. I know, Camille agreed. Yesterday I dropped an entire tray of financiers, and he just said clean it up, prepare another batch. No lecture, no death glare. Sophia noticed the changes too. The bakery's atmosphere had lightened subtly. Customers commented on the improved ambience, though nothing physical had changed. Sales were up, especially in the morning when regulars might catch a glimpse of the serious little boy in his apron, concentrating intensely under the chef's watchful eye. It's good marketing, Sophia teased Laurent during their weekly meeting. The intimidating French chef with his adorable apprentice? People love it, Laurent scowled. Matteo is not a marketing tool. Of course not, Sophia backpedaled, recognizing the protective note in Laurent's voice. But you have to admit things have been better since he started coming around. The staff seems happier, customers linger longer. Even you seem less. Less what? Laurent challenged. Tense, Sophia decided diplomatically. Laurent wouldn't admit it, but Sophia was right. Something had shifted in him since Matteo's arrival. The relentless perfectionism that had driven him for decades was still there, but tempered now by something else. A reminder of why he had fallen in love with patisserie in the first place. Through Matteo's eyes, Laurent rediscovered the magic, the wonder, the pure joy of transformation that occurred in the bakery each day. One particularly memorable morning, Laurent had been preparing to demonstrate pâte à choux, the temperamental dough used for eclairs and cream puffs. Matteo had watched the mise en place with his usual careful attention. This is perhaps the most technical dough we make, Laurent explained, measuring water, butter, salt into a saucepan. Timing is critical. Temperature control essential. Matteo nodded, solemnly, like a chemistry experiment. Laurent paused, surprised by the comparison. Yes, exactly like chemistry. How did you know that? Matteo shrugged. My science teacher says baking is chemistry we can eat. Laurent found himself smiling. A real smile, not the tight professional version he offered to customers. Your teacher is quite correct. As they worked through the stages of the dough, heating the liquid ingredients, adding flour, stirring vigorously, incorporating eggs, Laurent found himself explaining not just how, but why. Why the dough needed to be dried in the pan, why the eggs were added gradually, why the oven temperature started high then reduced. Matteo absorbed it all, asking questions that revealed a natural understanding of the principles involved. When Laurent finally piped the dough onto parchment, Matteo studied his technique with intense concentration. May I try? He asked. Laurent hesitated. Pâte à choux was challenging even for professionals. But Mateo's earnest expression, his proven care with equipment, his willingness to learn from mistakes all factored into Laurent's decision. Yes, but watch your pressure on the bag. Consistent, gentle. Even Mateo's first attempt was misshapen. Second, slightly better. By the third he had found the rhythm, his small hands surprisingly steady. The fourth was nearly perfect. Excellent, Laurent said, the praise understated but sincere. Mateo beamed at the rare compliment. When the finished cream puffs emerged from the oven, perfectly puffed, golden and hollow, ready for filling, Mateo looked at them with undisguised pride. We made those, he said with wonder, from just flour and water and eggs. You made those, Laurent corrected. I merely instructed. It was moments like these that reminded Laurent why he had invited the boy inside in the first place. Mateo's unfiltered joy, his pure appreciation for the craft, resonated with something long dormant in Laurent's heart, the part of him that had first fallen in love with patisserie before ambition, before professional pride had taken over. Alina too had noticed changes in her son. Mateo had always been a serious child, but now he approached everything with new confidence. His grades improved, especially in mathematics, which he now saw as practical, useful in measuring and scaling recipes. He slept more soundly, ate more heartily, carried himself with greater assurance. Your chef is good for you, Alina admitted, one evening as they shared a simple dinner of beans and rice. I see the difference in you. Mateo smiled. He says I have potential, Mama, that maybe someday I could be a real pastry chef. Alina reached across their small table to squeeze his hand. You can be anything you work for, mijo. Anything at all. As their fourth week began, Laurent decided it was time to introduce Mateo to chocolate work. He arranged tempering equipment on the marble counter, measured chocolate discs into metal bowls, prepared transfer sheets and molds. Today, he announced as Mateo donned his apron, we begin the most demanding aspect of patisserie. Chocolate requires perfect technique, absolute precision, complete attention. Mateo's eyes widened at the array of specialized equipment. It looks complicated. It is, Laurent agreed. But you are ready for the challenge. The words were simple, but their impact on Mateo was profound. You are ready, coming from Laurent, exacting perfectionist Laurent, who accepted nothing less than excellence. This was the highest praise imaginable. That morning, as Mateo successfully tempered his first small batch of chocolate, both student and teacher recognized a milestone had been reached. They were no longer simply going through the motions of instruction. They had become a team. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, cream-colored heavy paper, embossed with gold. Laurent examined it with unusual intensity, before slicing it open with a precise flick of his paring knife. What is it, chef? Mateo asked from his position. At the prep counter, where he was carefully piping ganache into tiny chocolate shells, Laurent read the contents, his expression unchanging, though something in his posture shifted subtly. The North American Pastry Championship, they've accepted. My application to compete? A competition? Mateo's eyes widened. Like on TV with judges and prizes. This is not television, Laurent corrected. This is the most prestigious pastry competition in North America. 3 days, one showpiece theme per day, judged by master chefs from around the world. Sophia, who had been reviewing inventory nearby, let out an excited whoop. Laurent, that's fantastic. When is it? 6 weeks from now. Chicago. Mateo carefully set down his piping bag. Will you win? Something flickered across Laurent's face. Determination, perhaps, or old pain. I will place first or second? Sophia asked, surprised by the uncharacteristic lack of absolute confidence. Laurent's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Philippe Martel will also be competing. The name clearly meant something to Sophia, whose expression shifted to concern. Ah, I see. Mateo looked between them, confused by the sudden tension. Who is Philippe Martel? Laurent returned the invitation to its envelope, his movements precise. My former mentor's son, a talented pastry chef. He has won this competition 3 years running. But you're better, right? Mateo asked with absolute certainty. Laurent paused, regarding Mateo with an expression that might almost be fondness. It is not always the most skilled who wins competitions, Mateo. Sometimes it is the most innovative. Felipe is known for his creativity, his unexpected combinations. My strength is technical perfection. Over the following days, the bakery's routine shifted subtly. Laurent spent every spare moment sketching, planning, testing components for his competition pieces. Mateo watched, fascinated, as the chef transformed ingredients into increasingly elaborate constructions. The theme is springtime, Renaissance, Laurent explained as he pulled delicate sugar ribbons into impossible curves. Each showpiece must incorporate chocolate sugar pastelage and at least one functioning mechanical element. Mechanical? Mateo asked. Like moving parts? Laurent nodded, concentrating on the sugar work. Yes. Last year, Felipe created a butterfly that actually flapped its wings, powered by a hidden air pump. Mateo's brow furrowed in concentration. What will you make, chef? A classical interpretation. A garden scene with a rotating centerpiece. Technically perfect, thematically appropriate, guaranteed to score well with traditional judges. Though Laurent maintained his usual composure, Mateo had learned to read the subtle signs of tension. The slight tightening around the chef's eyes, The marginally increased precision in his movements, the longer hours he spent alone in the kitchen after closing. One morning, as they worked side by side on petty fours, Matteo ventured a question. Have you competed against Felipe before? Laurent was silent for so long Matteo thought he might not answer. Finally he said 3 times, I have placed second each time. Oh, Matteo considered this. Is that why you left France? Because he kept winning? Laurent's hands stilled. Who told you I left France because of competition results? Matteo shrugged. Nobody. I just guessed. Sophia said you worked at a famous restaurant in Paris, but then came here to open Belle, and you don't like talking about Felipe. So I thought maybe. Laurent regarded Matteo with a mixture of irritation and something like respect. You are observant. But no, that is not entirely why I left. It is complicated. Adult complicated. Matteo asked with the wisdom of a child who had heard this explanation before. The corner of Laurent's mouth twitched in what might almost be a smile. Yes, adult complicated. As the competition drew nearer, Laurent became increasingly focused on his preparations, sometimes forgetting. Matteo was present as he muttered to himself in French, adjusting sketches, recalculating proportions. The boy didn't mind using these moments to practice techniques. He'd already been taught carefully piping, decorating, tempering chocolate under the distracted supervision of his mentor. One morning, as Laurent assembled a practice version of his centerpiece, an elaborate spring garden with a rotating carousel of sugar, flowers, Matteo noticed a fundamental flaw in the design. Chef, he said cautiously, I think the base might be too heavy. Laurent didn't look up from his work. The proportions are correct. I've calculated the weight distribution, but the motor. Matteo hesitated, knowing that questioning Laurent directly was risky. The motor you're using isn't strong enough for that much weight. It will turn too slowly, or maybe not at all. This got Laurent's attention. He straightened, regarding Matteo with surprise. How would you know that? Matteo shifted uncomfortably. My friend Carlos's dad fixes appliances. Sometimes I help in his shop after school. That motor is for small music boxes, not heavy sugar pieces. Laurent frowned, clearly about to dismiss the observation, then paused, returning his attention to the base. After a moment of examination, his frown deepened. You may be right. The torque is insufficient. You could use a different motor, Matteo suggested, or make the piece lighter. A different motor would require redesigning the entire base. We don't have time for that. Matteo considered the problem. What if instead of one big carousel, you did smaller ones? Like satellites around a center point. Each one could have its own small motor and they could move in different directions. Laurent stared at him. That would be more complex, more difficult to execute, but more interesting, right? And the judges would see multiple moving parts instead of just one. Laurent was silent, studying the design again. Matteo worried he had overstepped, but then Laurent did something unprecedented. He pushed his original sketch aside and pulled a fresh piece of paper toward him. Show me what you're thinking. Matteo's eyes widened, but he stepped forward tentatively, beginning to sketch. Like this, maybe. A central garden with smaller, rotating elements around it. Each one could represent a different aspect of spring. Laurent watched as Matteo's small hands moved across the paper. The design was childish in execution, but the concept had merit. Multiple focal points, each with movement, creating a more dynamic presentation while solving the weight distribution problem. This is ... double quotes. Laurent paused, seeking the right word. Innovative. Coming from Laurent, this was extraordinary praise. Matteo tried to contain his smile, but couldn't quite manage it. It's just an idea, he said modestly. You're the chef. Laurent studied the sketch a moment longer, then began to refine it with quick, precise strokes. It will require recalculating everything. The proportions, the timing, the balance. Is that bad? Laurent looked up, his expression determined. No, it is necessary. Thank you, Matteo. Those 2 words, thank you, so rarely spoken by Laurent, hung in the air between them, marking another shift in their relationship. No longer just teacher and student, but collaborators, each bringing something valuable to their shared work. As Laurent began reworking his design, Sophia approached, raising an eyebrow at the unusual sight of Laurent incorporating someone else's idea. Matteo explained in whispers what had happened. Well, I'll be damned, Sophia murmured. Laurent Durand, taking suggestion from an 8-year-old. Miracles do happen. Alina stared at the notice in her hand, the words blurring as tears threatened. 30 days. They had 30 days to vacate the apartment she had called home for the past 3 years. The building had been sold to a development company that planned to renovate and modernize, code for tripling the rent and pricing out families like hers. Mama, what's wrong? Matteo stood in the doorway of their tiny kitchen, concern etched on his young face. Elena quickly wiped her eyes, forcing a smile. Nothing, me. Oh, just some grown-up paperwork. Matteo wasn't fooled. At 8, he had developed an uncanny ability to read emotions, particularly his mother's. Is it bills again? I heard Mrs. Rodriguez saying she could watch me after school if you need to take extra shifts. The offer from their elderly neighbor, kind as it was, wouldn't solve this problem. Alina folded the eviction notice, tucking it into her pocket. No, Matteo, it's not about money. At least not directly. Don't worry, I'll figure something out. But as the evening progressed, Elena's worry only deepened. Rental prices in their neighborhood had skyrocketed as gentrification transformed the once affordable area. Moving further out would mean longer commutes to her jobs, higher transportation costs, possibly even needing to change Mateo's school. Every solution she considered created new problems, cascading complications she couldn't resolve. Maybe we could stay with cousin Eduardo, Mateo suggested over their simple dinner, sensing his mother's distress despite her efforts to hide it. Shook her head. Eduardo's two-bedroom apartment already housed his family of 5. That's not an option, mijo. What about Mateo, please? Let me handle this. The sharpness in her tone made Mateo flinch. Immediately, Elena regretted it, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. I'm sorry, I shouldn't snap at you. This isn't your problem to solve, but it would affect him perhaps more than anyone. Mateo's routine, his school, his newfound apprenticeship at the bakery, all might be disrupted by this forced move. The thought of telling him he might not be able to continue his morning lessons with Chef Laurent made Elena's chest tighten with fresh pain. The next morning, Mateo sensed something was wrong when his mother didn't walk him all the way to Bellamy, instead stopping at the corner. I need to go early today, she explained, avoiding his eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez will pick you up from school, okay? Mateo nodded, confused but didn't question her. As he approached the bakery alone, he saw Laurent through the window, already working intently on competition preparations. The chef had been different lately, still demanding, still precise, but with a new energy that made the kitchen feel alive with possibility. Inside, Mateo went through his usual routine, apron, hand washing, mise en place. But his movements lacked their usual enthusiasm, distracted by worry about his mother's strange behavior. Your ganache is splitting, Laurent observed after watching Mateo stir the chocolate mixture with uncharacteristic carelessness. You're not maintaining consistent temperature. Sorry, Chef, Mateo murmured, starting over. Laurent studied him with narrowed eyes. Your mind is elsewhere this morning. It wasn't a question, but Mateo answered anyway. My mama is worried about something. She won't tell me what, but I think it's serious. Laurent returned to his work, but after a moment asked, is she ill? No. I think it's money. Or maybe our apartment. She was reading something that made her cry. Laurent said nothing more, but Mateo noticed him exchange a glance with Sophia, who had been arranging the front display case within earshot. Arrived to collect Mateo, Sophia approached her. Alina, could I speak with you a moment? In the office? Mateo watched curiously as his mother followed Sophia, concern evident in her posture. When they emerged 10 minutes later, Elena's expression was unreadable, but Sophia was smiling. See you tomorrow, Mateo, Sophia called as they left. Don't forget, we're testing the new apricot tart recipe. Mateo waited until they were halfway to school before asking what did Ms. Sophia want to talk about. Elena hesitated. She offered me some additional work. Inventory management, order processing, office tasks I could do in the afternoons between my other jobs. That's good, right? Extra money? Yes, it would be good. But, Elena sighed, it might not be enough. Our building was sold. We need to find a new place to live soon, and apartments are very expensive now. Mateo stopped walking, his small face crumpling. We have to move. But what about Bellamy's? What? About Chef Laurent? I don't know, Mateo. We might need to move further out where rent is cheaper. That could mean a different routine. The possibility was devastating. In the months since beginning his apprenticeship, Mateo had found purpose. Joy, a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. The thought of losing that connection made his chest hurt. I could help more, he offered desperately. Maybe Chef would pay me to clean up or wash dishes after school. Elena's heart broke at her son's attempt to solve adult problems. Oh, mijo, that's not your responsibility. You're a child, your job is school and learning. But Bellamy's is important, Mama. Chef Laurent is teaching me real skills. It could be my future. The conviction in his voice, the certainty that this opportunity represented something vital and irreplaceable, made Elena question her own assumptions. Had she been underestimating the significance of Mateo's apprenticeship, seeing it merely as a nice extracurricular activity rather than the potentially life-changing opportunity her son clearly believed it to be? Over the next 3 days, Elena's distraction grew more pronounced. She missed picking Mateo up, forcing Laurent to walk him to school. She arrived late to her afternoon shift, earning a warning from her supervisor. She lay awake nights calculating figures that never balanced, searching for solutions that remained elusive. On the 4th day, Mateo arrived at Bellamy's to find Laurent in an uncharacteristic state of disarray. Normally immaculate workstations were cluttered with half-finished preparations. A sugar sculpture lay in fragments, the chef staring at the broken pieces with unreadable expression. Chef, Mateo approached cautiously. What happened? Laurent looked up as if surprised to find Mateo there. A miscalculation. The internal structure was flawed. 3 days of work wasted. The competition was now just over a month away. This setback could seriously impact Laurent's preparation schedule. Mateo had never seen the chef so disturbed, not even when a delivery of premium chocolate had arrived, damaged beyond use. Can you fix it? Mateo asked. Laurent, single quotes, laugh was short, sharp, without humor. Not without starting over completely. The structural integrity is compromised beyond repair. He gestured to the design sketches now marked with frustrated notations. The concept is too ambitious for the time frame we have left. But your new design, the one with the smaller rotating elements, it's so much better than what Philippa would make better is irrelevant if it cannot be completed. Laurent began clearing away the broken pieces, his movements sharp with suppressed emotion. Perhaps this is fitting. Always second, never first. Some patterns cannot be broken. Matteo had never heard such defeat in Laurent's voice. The chef who demanded perfection, who accepted no excuses, who pushed through every obstacle through sheer force of will, suddenly seemed diminished. You can't give up, Matteo said with unexpected fierceness. You always tell me that failures are instructive, that we learn from mistakes. You have to try again. Laurent looked at Matteo with surprise, as if truly seeing him for the first time that morning. The boy stood straight, shoulders back, chin raised, a mirror of Laurent's own usual posture. When did you become so wise? Laurent asked the question, softly, almost to himself. Matteo flushed with embarrassment, but held his ground. I'm just repeating what you taught me, chef. For a moment neither spoke, the broken sugar sculpture between them, representing more than just a competition setback. Then Matteo stepped forward, reaching for the broom. I'll clean this up, he said. Then we can start again. Together? The weight of her duffel bag dug into Elena's shoulder as she climbed the stairs to their apartment. The eviction notice had given them 30 days, but reality had accelerated that timeline. Their landlord, anxious to begin renovations, had offered 2 weeks' rent refund if they vacated by the end of the week. With no alternative housing secured, the money would buy them a few nights in a motel while Elena frantically searched for an apartment they could afford. She had told Matteo that morning, trying to frame it as an adventure, a temporary setback. His silent acceptance had been worse than tears. He'd simply nodded and asked if he could take his school books and the small notebook where he recorded Chef Laurent's recipes. The resignation in his young voice had nearly broken her. At the landing, Elena paused, catching her breath. Mrs. Rodriguez's door opened, her elderly neighbor peering out with concern. Elena, you're home early. Half day at the hotel, Elena explained. I need to pack more of our things before Matteo gets home from school. Mrs. Rodriguez clicked her tongue sympathetically. This neighborhood becoming too expensive. Driving out families who built this community. It's not right. Elena managed a tired smile. It's the way things are. You found a new place yet? Elena shook her head, looking at a studio apartment. Across town tomorrow? It's small, but might work temporarily. Across town? But what about Matteo's school and his bakery lessons? That French chef has been good for him. I've never seen the boy so happy. The reminder sent fresh pain through Elena's chest. Some things can't be helped, Mrs. Rodriguez. We'll adjust. Inside their apartment, Elena surveyed the half-packed living room. Most of their possessions were already in boxers. They didn't own much. The furniture belonged to the landlord. Their lives could be dismantled, packed away, transported in a matter of hours. The thought brought both sadness and a strange sense of freedom. The knock at the door startled her. Perhaps Mrs. Rodriguez with another casserole or advice about cheap apartments? Instead, Elena opened the door to find Laurent Durand standing in her hallway looking distinctly uncomfortable. Chef Laurent? Elena's surprise rendered her momentarily speechless. Matteo's at school, is something wrong? Laurent stood rigidly, his usual chef's whites, replaced by a simple black sweater and dark pants. Nothing is wrong. May I come in? I need to speak with you. Still confused, Elena stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Laurent surveyed the half-packed apartment, taking in the stacked boxes, the empty shelves. Matteo mentioned you were being forced to relocate, he said without preamble. He's quite distressed about it. Elena's defenses rose immediately. We'll be fine. Matteo is resilient, of course. Laurent nodded stiffly. However, I have a proposition that might benefit both of you. Elena gestured to the couch, the only furniture remaining in the living room. Laurent sat, perching uncomfortably on the edge, as if afraid to fully commit to relaxation. Bellamy's bakery has storage space above the shop, he explained. A small apartment? Originally, Sophia has been using it to store promotional materials, equipment, overflow inventory. It could be converted back to living quarters. Quickly, Elena stared at him. Are you offering us housing? Temporarily, Laurent clarified. Until you secure something permanent. The space is small but functional. 1 bedroom, a small living area, bathroom, kitchenette. It would allow Matteo to maintain his routine while you search for suitable accommodations without pressure. Elena's pride warred with practicality. I couldn't accept charity. It isn't charity, Laurent countered. Sophia has been wanting to clear that space for months. Having someone living above the bakery provides additional security. You would be doing us a favor. Elena wasn't convinced. And the rent? Laurent hesitated. We had considered a reduced rate in exchange for additional responsibilities. Inventory management, perhaps some administrative tasks. Sophia mentioned you have experience in these areas. The conversation with Sophia earlier that week suddenly made more sense. They had been laying groundwork for this offer. Elena's suspicion must have shown on her face because Laurent continued with uncharacteristic awkwardness. Matteo's presence at the bakery has been beneficial. To the business, to the staff, to me. He seemed uncomfortable with this admission. His apprenticeship is progressing well. Relocating across town would make continuing impossible. So this is about Mateo keeping your student? Laurent met her eyes directly. Partly, yes. He has genuine talent, Alina. The kind that should be nurtured. But it's also about, he paused, struggling for words, community. Something Sophia has been lecturing me about for years that I'm only beginning to understand. The sincerity in his voice gave Alina pause. This clearly wasn't a casual offer. I would pay proper rent, she insisted. Maybe not market rate, but something fair, of course. And it would be temporary, until we find our own place. Laurent nodded. Understood. Alina considered the proposal, weighing pride against practicality. The apartment above Bellamy's would allow Mateo to continue his apprenticeship, to stay in his school, to maintain the stability he desperately needed. It would give Alina breathing room to find permanent housing without the pressure of imminent homelessness. I would need to see the space first, she said finally. Naturally, it requires cleaning, organizing. Sophia has already begun clearing out the stored items. It could be ready within days. Alina studied Laurent, trying to understand his motivation. Why are you doing this, really? Laurent was silent for a moment, considering his answer. When I was 10, my mother and I were evicted from our apartment in Marseille. No warning, no alternatives. We lived in a shelter for 3 months. His voice remained even emotionless, as if reciting facts from a cookbook. The patisserie where I eventually apprenticed provided stability, structure, purpose during a chaotic time. I simply wished to offer Mateo the same opportunity. The personal disclosure surprised Alina. Laurent never spoke about his past. This glimpse into his childhood explained much about the man he had become. His rigidity, his self-discipline, his recognition of something familiar in Mateo. I'll consider it, Alina said, but I need to see the space first. Of course. Could you come by the bakery after closing today, 6 o'clock? Sophia will be there with the keys. Alina nodded, her mind already calculating how this might work. The commute to her jobs, the logistics of moving their minimal possessions, the potential complications of living above her son's workplace. When Laurent left, Alina sat among the boxers, considering the unexpected lifeline he had thrown them. Pride insisted she should refuse, find her own solution, maintain independence. Practicality argued that temporary support wasn't surrender, but strategic retreat. Most compelling was the thought of Mateo's face when she told him they wouldn't have to leave the neighborhood, that his apprenticeship could continue. At 6 o'clock, Alina stood in Bellamy's bakery after hours, following Sophia up a narrow staircase hidden behind an unmarked door in the back hallway. The space above was dusty, cluttered with boxes and equipment, but Alina could see the potential. High ceilings, large windows that overlooked the street below, exposed brick walls that added character to the small space. It needs work, Sophia acknowledged, pushing aside a stack of flattened cake boxes, but the bones are good. Bathroom plumbing was updated last year. Kitchen is small but functional. Alina walked the perimeter, assessing 1,000 square feet, perhaps larger than their current apartment. The single bedroom would be Mateo's. She could use the living area. With some cleaning, organization of the remaining storage items, it could work. It could actually work. Well, Sophia asked, watching Elena's face. What do you think? Elena turned, taking in the space with fresh eyes, seeing not what it was, but what it could be. I think we might have a solution. Chicago's convention center buzzed with activity, pastry chefs from across the continent, arranging equipment, checking supplies, consulting notes. The North American Pastry Championship had taken over the massive space, transforming it into a battlefield of sugar, chocolate, and flour. Mateo stood beside Laurent, taking in the scene with wide eyes. The chef had surprised everyone by announcing that Mateo would accompany him to the competition as his assistant. Sophia had arranged for Alina to join them, ensuring Mateo would be properly supervised during the event. Now mother and son were experiencing their first trip beyond the city limits, both quietly overwhelmed by the scale of the occasion. Remember, Laurent instructed, as they approached their assigned station, you are here to observe and assist. Basic tasks only, nothing technical. Mateo nodded solemnly. Laurent had spent weeks preparing him for this role, teaching him competition, protocol terminology, proper behavior. The boy wore a miniature version of Laurent's chef coat, his name embroidered above the pocket. Mateo Martinez Jr., assistant chef. Laurent? A camera crew approached Laurent, extending a microphone. You're a 3-time silver medalist in this competition. Do you think this is your year for gold? Laurent's expression remained professional neutral. Every competitor here brings exceptional skill. The judges will decide. And who's this? The reporter asked, noticing Mateo. My assistant, Laurent replied. Simply, we need to prepare now, if you'll excuse us. As they continued to their station, Mateo spotted a tall, elegant man surrounded by a team in matching chef coats. The man exuded confidence, charisma, his movements fluid, theatrical as he directed his assistants. Is that him? Mateo whispered. Felipe. Martel. Laurent nodded once curtly. Yes. As if sensing their attention, Felipe looked up his gaze, finding Laurent. A smile spread across his handsome face as he approached, arms outstretched. Laurent, mon vieux. How wonderful to see you again. The two chefs exchanged formal cheek kisses. Laurent's posture stiff, Felipe's relaxed and expansive. They spoke rapidly in French, Mateo catching only fragments. Competition, congratulations restaurant. Felipe's gaze eventually fell to Mateo, his perfectly shaped eyebrows rising in surprise. And who is this petty chef? He asked, switching to English. Mateo Martinez, my assistant, Laurent introduced. Mateo, this is Chef Felipe Martel. Felipe crouched to Mateo's level, his smile dazzling. An assistant so young, how delightful. Are you learning all of Laurent's secrets? Mateo nodded shyly. He's teaching me about pastry. Laurent teaching. Felipe's surprise seemed genuine. How extraordinary. He was always so private with his techniques. Something in Felipe's tone suggested history complexity. Mateo glanced between the two chefs, sensing undercurrents he couldn't fully understand. We should prepare, Laurent said, checking his watch. The competition begins in 30 minutes. Felipe straightened, smoothing his already immaculate chef coat. Of course, may the best chef win, Laurent. Though we both know who that will be, yes. With a wink and another dazzling smile, he returned to his team. I don't like him, Mateo declared quietly, as they continued to their station. Laurent's expression betrayed nothing. Felipe is an exceptional pastry chef. He's showing off, Mateo insisted, and he wasn't nice about you teaching me. A faint smile touched Laurent's lips. Your loyalty is appreciated, Mateo, but focus now. We have work to do. Their workstation was impeccably organized. For weeks, Laurent had practiced setting up, breaking down, refining the process until every tool, ingredient, component had its precise place. Mateo's role was carefully defined. Basic preparation, handing tools, maintaining cleanliness, nothing that would affect scoring, nothing that could go wrong. The competition began with an announcement. Judges taking their positions, competitors standing ready. Laurent rolled his shoulders once, then became utterly still, utterly focused. Mateo had seen this transformation before. Laurent entering a state of complete concentration where nothing existed except the work. The first day's challenge was announced. A plated dessert showcasing spring flavors incorporating 3 mandatory ingredients: rhubarb, white chocolate, edible flowers. Competitors had 6 hours to create 16 identical plates. Laurent moved with precision, executing his plan exactly as practiced. Mateo shadowed him, anticipating needs, wiping surfaces, organizing components. Elena watched from the audience area, occasionally catching her son's eye, offering encouraging smiles. For hours and disaster struck. As Laurent removed a delicate white chocolate decoration from its mold, the thin structure cracked, splitting directly through its center. For a moment, Laurent froze, staring at the broken piece. Chef Mateo whispered, "The backup molds." Laurent shook his head. "No time to remold. These take 2 hours to set properly." Mateo studied the broken piece. "Could you make it look intentional? Like it's supposed to be broken?" Laurent considered this, then discarded the idea. The judges would recognize the improvisation. Technical perfection is my signature. Nearby, Felipe was creating an elaborate showpiece, his team moving in choreographed harmony. His plated dessert was taking shape. Whimsical, colorful, innovative. Exactly what the judges would expect from him. Mateo bit his lip, thinking quickly. What about a different technique? You showed me those chocolate curls last week. The really thin ones that look like ribbons. Could those replace the molded pieces? Laurent checked the clock, calculating. Perhaps, but they require steady hands, perfect temperature control. I could help, Mateo offered. My hands are steady. Laurent hesitated. The competition rules allowed assistants to perform basic tasks, but nothing requiring significant skill. Yet without some solution, the entire presentation would be compromised. Very well, Laurent decided. I'll prepare the first chocolate sheet. You'll practice on that while I continue with the other components. Laurent quickly tempered a small batch of white chocolate, spreading it in a paper-thin layer on a marble slab. As it began to set, reaching the perfect pliable consistency, he demonstrated the technique, using a scraper to create delicate curls, each one perfectly formed. Like this, he showed Mateo. Angle is critical. Too steep it breaks, too shallow it won't curl properly. Mateo nodded, watching intently. His first attempt broke the chocolate, shattering into unusable fragments. His second produced an uneven curl. By the third, he had found the rhythm, creating a perfect ribbon-like structure that caught the light beautifully. Good, Laurent approved. Continue. We need 16 identical pieces. As Mateo worked, Laurent adjusted his design, incorporating the curls rather than the planned molded decorations. The change would cost points for technical difficulty but gain marks for visual appeal if executed properly. From the audience, Elena watched with pride as her son worked. Alongside Laurent, their movements synchronized, complementary. Mateo's face showed complete concentration, his small hands moving with surprising confidence. Whatever happened in the competition, she realized Mateo had already gained something precious. Confidence, purpose, belonging. With 30 minutes remaining, Laurent and Mateo assembled the final plates. The chocolate curls created delicate structures that caught the light, enhanced the plated desserts. Visual appeal while maintaining the spring theme. Not what Laurent had planned, but perhaps something better. A perfect balance of technique and unexpected beauty. As time was called, Laurent stepped back from their completed work. 16 identical plates, each one featuring a complex dessert of rhubarb, mousse, white chocolate lacca, edible flour jelly, and the delicate chocolate curls that Matteo had created. "Well done, Laurent," said quietly. Coming from him this simple acknowledgement carried more weight than effusive praise from anyone else. Matteo beamed with pride. "Do you think we have a chance, chef?" Laurent surveyed their work, then glanced toward Philippe's station, where a more elaborate, more colorful creation awaited judging. "We have done our best," Laurent replied. "That is all we can control." As the judges began their rounds, moving from station to station, Matteo slipped his small hand into Laurent's. The chef looked down, surprised, then gently squeezed the boy's hand. "In return, whatever happens," Matteo said with 80-year-old certainty, "your dessert is better than Philippe's." Laurent's expression softened momentarily. "Thank you, Matteo. But remember, it's our dessert now." Second place, again. Laurent stood on the podium. Felipe once more. On the higher step, the gold medal gleaming around his neck. The judges' comments echoed in Laurent's mind. Extraordinary technique, perfect execution, elegant presentation. All followed by the inevitable, but lacked the innovative spirit of our champion. A single point. He had lost by a single point. Matteo watched from the audience, his expression suggesting this outcome was nothing short of criminal. Alina beside him applauded politely, though her eyes held concern for both her son and his mentor. Afterward, as competitors packed equipment exchanged, "Congratulations," Felipe approached Laurent, champagne, flute in hand. "Magnificent work as always, Laurent. Those chocolate curls, so delicate, so precise. Your assistant has talented hands." Laurent nodded stiffly. "Thank you." "Your rhubarb sphere was impressive." Felipe smiled his perfect Cameretti smile. "Perhaps next year, mon ami. Fifth time's the charm." "Yes." As Felipe moved away to speak with journalists, Laurent felt Matteo appear at his side, indignation radiating from his small frame. "It's not fair. Your dessert tasted better. I saw the judges' faces when they tried it." Laurent carefully packed his knives into their role. Taste is one component. Matteo, presentation, innovation, technical difficulty all factor into scoring. But second place in North America's most prestigious pastry competition is an achievement, Matteo, not a failure. Matteo didn't look convinced but fell silent, helping Laurent organize their remaining equipment. The boy had worked tirelessly throughout the 3-day competition, handling basic tasks while absorbing everything around him. Laurent had noted with quiet pride how other competitors commented on Matteo's focused discipline. Unusual maturity. The return to New York was subdued. Laurent lost in thought Matteo, watching him with concern, Alina mediating between them with gentle conversation. Arriving at Bellamy's late Sunday evening, they found the bakery dark closed for the weekend. "Come up for dinner," Alina invited as Laurent prepared to leave for his own apartment. "Nothing fancy, but you shouldn't be alone after such a long trip." Laurent hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. I'll just drop off the competition materials first." The apartment above Bellamy's had transformed in the weeks since Alina and Matteo moved in. Simple furniture, mostly secondhand, filled the space. Bright curtains softened the industrial windows. Matteo's school projects and carefully copied recipes adorned the refrigerator. It felt like a home, warm, inviting, despite its modest furnishings. Over a simple meal of arroz con palo, Laurent gradually relaxed his characteristic stiffness, softening as Matteo enthusiastically recounted highlights from the competition: the intricate sugar sculptures, the gravity-defying chocolate constructions, the theatrical presentations. "I want to compete someday," Matteo declared, "when I'm older. It requires years of training, dedication, sacrifice," Laurent cautioned. Matteo nodded seriously. "I know. That's why I need to keep learning from you, chef. So I'll be ready." Alina observed the exchange, smiling at her son's determination. "Matteo, why don't you get ready for bed? It's late, and you have school tomorrow." Once Matteo had reluctantly departed, Alina turned to Laurent. "He admires you so much. This apprenticeship means everything to him." Laurent nodded, uncomfortable with the emotional direction of the conversation. "He has potential, genuine talent." "It's more than that," Alina insisted. "You've given him something I couldn't. A vision for his future. Before Bellamy's, he was just getting through each day. Now he has purpose, dreams." Laurent shifted in his chair. "I should go. Early start tomorrow." "Of course. But Laurent, thank you. Not just for Chicago, but for everything. The apartment, the opportunity you've given Matteo. It's changed our lives." In the doorway, Matteo reappeared in pajamas, clutching a small wrapped package. "Wait, chef, I have something for you." Laurent accepted the clumsily wrapped gift, raising an eyebrow in question. "It's for your almost winning," Matteo explained. "Open it." Inside, Laurent found a handmade card featuring a crayon drawing of himself. In Chef White's holding what appeared to be a trophy. Inside, in careful handwriting, "To Chef Laurent, the best teacher and the real champion, from your assistant Matteo." Something shifted in Laurent's expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. "Thank you, Matteo. I will treasure this." Walking to his apartment, Laurent found himself reflecting on the competition, not the loss which would once have consumed him but the unexpected moments of connection, Mateo's determined concentration as he created those crucial chocolate curls. The pride in Elena's eyes as she watched her son work, the feeling not of solitary perfection but of shared accomplishment. That Monday morning brought normalcy. Pre-dawn preparations, the familiar rhythm of the bakery. Laurent moved through his routine with mechanical precision, his mind still processing the competition results. Second place again. Always second. Chef, are you okay? Mateo had arrived for his morning lesson, finding Laurent staring at a batch of croissant dough, uncharacteristically distracted. Yes, fine. Laurent straightened. Today we'll work on shoes, pastry, but as they proceeded through the lesson, Laurent found himself watching Mateo with new awareness. The boy had grown in confidence, skill, understanding during these months. What had begun as simple charity, a moment of weakness bringing a cold child in from the rain, had evolved into something neither had anticipated. Not just teaching but legacy. Not just skills but passion. Mateo was absorbing not just techniques but an entire worldview. The pursuit of excellence, the discipline of craft. Sophia arrived, later than usual, carrying newspapers, magazines. You should see these, she announced, spreading them across the counter. The competition coverage. You're a hit, Laurent. Or rather, you and Mateo are. The articles featured photos of Laurent and Mateo working side by side. The serious chef and his equally serious miniature assistant creating delicate chocolate work. Tradition meets future, one headline proclaimed. Another dubbed them the perfectionist and the prodigy. Most surprising was a feature in Pastry Arts magazine where Felipe himself was quoted. Laurent Durand has always been technically brilliant, but seeing him mentor this child shows a new dimension to his craft. Perhaps even more impressive than his extraordinary desserts. Laurent read the articles with growing amazement. The competition he had entered hoping finally to defeat Felipe had somehow become about something else entirely. The narrative wasn't about winning or losing, but about connection, transmission of knowledge, a master chef investing in the next generation. People are calling, Sophia reported, excitement coloring her voice. Asking about classes for their children, wanting to know if we're starting a formal apprenticeship program. This could be huge, Laurent, a whole new direction for Bellamy's. Laurent looked up from the articles to find Mateo carefully piping shoes, pastry, his technique nearly perfect, his concentration absolute. Beyond him through the kitchen doorway, Laurent could see Elena organizing invoices at the small desk they'd set up for her administrative work. The bakery hummed with purposeful activity, a sense of community Laurent had never prioritized before. A new direction, Laurent repeated thoughtfully. 1 month later, Bellamy's Bakery unveiled its apprentice program, weekend classes for children interested in French pastry. The waiting list filled immediately, applications pouring in from across the city. Laurent oversaw the curriculum, while Mateo proudly served as demonstration assistant, his confidence growing with each session. The apartment upstairs became permanent. Elena taking over management of Bellamy's business operations, bringing organization, efficiency, and warmth to the bakery's administration. The storage room became a classroom. The kitchen expanded to accommodate eager students. Bellamy's transformed from an austere temple of pastry perfection to a vibrant community space where excellence and joy coexisted. Laurent still demanded precision, still expected the highest standards. But something fundamental had shifted. Watching Mateo guide younger children through their first attempts at pastry cream, Laurent recognized the reflection of his own teaching, but gentler, more patient. The boy had absorbed Laurent's knowledge while tempering it with his own natural warmth. You know what's remarkable? Sophia observed one day watching Laurent demonstrate piping techniques to a rapt audience of children. You're smiling. Actually, smiling. Laurent didn't deny it. Second place in a competition once would have seemed failure. Now surrounded by eager students with Mateo at his side, Laurent had discovered that some victories couldn't be measured in medals or points. Some championships weren't won on podiums. Chef, look, Mateo called, holding up a perfectly formed chocolate krill, just like Chicago. Laurent nodded his approval, pride warming his chest. Excellent, Mateo. Now show your students how it's done.